Hello friends, this is Thaddeus from Going Nerdy, and today I am going to be talking about or providing you with my review of the Solo, a Star Wars story movie. Now, if you haven't seen this movie, there will be absolutely no spoilers. However, if you do want to go in with just kind of a clear mind, a clear idea as to what to expect, and you just want to go in with your own expectations, probably want to stop this video now. Now, that being said, I will talk about expectations a little bit later in this video. Now, the first thing that I want to say is I have seen this movie twice. I went opening night, 7 o'clock, really excited. Watched it in the, not IMAX. That was today on Saturday. It was really interesting. Now, I'm glad that I waited to see it a second time to make this video, because I definitely feel that my thoughts have changed based on a second screening. When I went in, I had all of these expectations. I wasn't entirely sure as to what to expect, so I'd put in my own thoughts, my own ideas, and really they weren't super met. And so right off the bat, my first review, my first thought, my first review of the film would have been very low. It would have been closer to, I don't know, maybe a 50%. I don't think it would have gone much lower than that, but definitely about probably a 50%. Now, if you look at Rotten Tomatoes, it is sitting at a 71 overall score. Now, that is including all of the critic scores, that is including audience scores, and critics really like this movie, but that's to be said about really all Star Wars movies so far. Audience scores have it at a 58%, which is really nothing to be excited about, right? I mean, half the viewers, at least half of the viewers, like it a little more than they dislike it. Metacritic, the meta score is at 63%. If you look at the critics' score distribution, it has 32 positive reviews, 20 kind of like mixed reviews, and then 1 negative review. Now, what's interesting, again, if you look at this information, if you look at the Metacritic review section, it drops pretty quickly. Like, the highest score so far as of May 15th was 91, and then it goes all the way down to 25. And that's a huge drop. And what's interesting is the New York Post actually says, Solo sadly should be frozen in carbonite. Now, I don't think that it's that bad, but what is indicative of this film is kind of these median ranges. And if you go to IMDb, what I find incredibly fascinating is you have a ton of people, you have the largest percent is really giving it between a 6 and a 9. And so for me, that's a pretty indicative score. That means, hey, guess what? On average, people give you a C+, a 7.1 or a 70%. That's not terrible, but as a fan, and I think this is the key point here, is this movie was not made for die-hard fans. It was made to be an entertaining movie. And if you look at it that way, it does a pretty good job. It's an action-packed movie that is a true origin story in every sense of the word. It shows everything from how Han becomes Han Solo, and that makes sense in the movie, to how he gets the Millennium Falcon. It's for point, this movie gives viewers all the information of how he went from this, scum rat or stank rat, I forget what they call him, on the streets of Corellia to essentially the general, right? I mean, it doesn't go all the way that far, but with the other movies, it does, right? It shows you that storyline. This movie is just that first step into the world of smuggling. And it is definitely interesting. It uses a lot of the elements that fans are familiar with. It shows some things that we haven't really seen on the big screen. Obviously, the Kessel Run is part of it. We see Kessel. We see a few of the really cool crime syndicate families outside of the Hutts, right? The Hutts are not the only crime family in the galaxy. And it was neat to see that. It was neat to see a few different warring competitions. I didn't see Black Sun, which means I also didn't see Prince Shizor, but fingers crossed that he will be in Solo 2 or whatever spinoff that is to follow up this. Now, it was neat to see the different crime families. This was definitely a crime movie. Wasn't the heist movie that I thought that it would be. Now, there were definitely some highlights in the film. First and foremost, this shows us a young Han. And why I like that is it shows a young, optimistic Han. It shows the inner Han. This is what I like to view as Han, like current Han, Harrison Ford Han's inner child. This is the Han that Harrison Ford is trying to protect. You know, he's not an idealistic person, but he tends to help, you know, the underdog. He sees bad things and is willing to step up and is willing to say, hey, that's not right. I'm going to do better, or I'm going to whatever. It helps characterize him as a good person. Yes, he's a smuggler, but remember, he's a smuggler with a heart of gold. And that's definitely shown here. That's definitely what we see. He wants to be a bad guy. He wants to be that outlaw, but he's not. He's Han. And Han is a good guy. Another one of the really big highlights for me, and this was not something that I noticed on the first screening, is this film really gives more detail, more background into Chewie, right? Because Chewie's not seen as Han's sidekick in this film. Not initially. I mean, towards the end, he's definitely, you know, he's definitely their buddy-buddy. It's still got that bromance, still got that buddy cop film feel to it to an extent. But what it does is it shows Chewie's motivations. It shows that there's a character behind Chewie. And I don't think that we've ever seen that in a Star Wars film. We get it in the comics, we get it in the books, we get it in the video games, and a number of other areas of the story. We don't get it in the film. And I think that that was really cool to see. I really liked getting that background. Now, it was also cool to see how Han met Chewie. I really liked that. I thought that was kind of neat. Now, additionally, I think the childish Landino did a great job embodying the spirit of Billy D. Williams. It was cool to see him kind of embrace that. Now, definitely there were moments of this that were more believable than others. Definitely there were some key lines that he gave that were crucial, that were just spot on OG Lando, and I loved it. I thought he did a great job. Sometimes, again, kind of fell flat, but not always. I would have liked a little more, you know, background into Lando, but that's not what this movie was about. So now moving on, one of the last things that I really want to say, and I won't go into this, I loved the cameos and the tie-ins. I'm not going to say who they were or what they were. This is not a spoiler video. I will make one of those. It's coming. But I did love all of them. And there were a few. There were a few that I had to look for a couple of different times. And I'm excited to see what those bring to the table. Now, moving on to the low points, my biggest problem was unmet expectations. They did not really do a great job setting expectations. They didn't say, hey, this is what this movie's going to be about. It is definitely a heist movie, but it's not the heist movie that I thought it was going to be. I was thinking more of an Ocean's 11, some witty banter, some back and forth. And there was some, but it wasn't nearly as good as I would have liked it to be. And definitely, the trailers made me feel like I think I was just focused on the wrong thing, because the movie that I saw the first time was not the movie I was expecting to see. Now, that's not always a bad thing, but because I didn't have my expectations met, I left the theater that very first time kind of angry, kind of upset. So I went back a second time, you know, some time had passed, obviously a little less than 24 hours had passed, and I went and saw it, and knowing what to expect, I enjoyed the movie a lot more the second time. I think with each subsequent viewing, I will probably enjoy the movie more. But because they didn't do a great job marketing, and granted, they had, you know, problem with directors, they had problem with acting coaches being brought in. There was a lot of problems with this. It really bugged me that I went in with the wrong expectations. Now, that being said, I think that's really what a lot of the problem with the Star Wars movies are now. Fans who are diehard fans like myself have an expectation, and we've built it up so much into our minds that when those expectations are not met, it's really hard. Now, here's the thing. I went into this with very specific expectations because I thought it was going to be one thing and it was something else. Again, that something else worked for the movie, but it wasn't the movie that I was expecting. Next, I didn't feel that the movie dragged necessarily. There have been a lot of reviews that say, around the second act, it kind of slows down a bit. I didn't feel that. What I felt, though, is I was always on the verge of excitement, but never quite getting there. There were definitely some moments of like, it was building up to something, building up to something, building up to something, and then it backed off.
That's what she said.
But it backed off to what it started at, the building up, right? So it didn't like completely pull off the throttle, but it didn't really gun it forward.
We're just done with phrasing, right? That's not a thing anymore.
That leads me to my next thing. There were no real stakes in the film. I mean, we know that Han and Chewie survive, and so the real question is, do we care enough about the other characters to invest emotionally in them? And the answer is no. And I really didn't feel emotionally connected in a number of the characters. I won't say who or what, but they didn't do enough so that when stuff happened, it didn't have the weight that it could have. It could have been a lot better if we had built up those character relationships a little more. Personally, I just didn't feel it, right? And again, that's something that I'm seeing a lot of people talk about. There is no real stake in this movie. We know Han and Chewie survive, and we don't care enough about these other characters to really give two shakes whether or not they succeed or fail. Which makes it kind of frustrating. Moving on, there really is no romantic chemistry between Han Solo and Qi'ra. I felt that, yeah, they kissed, but it's kind of a kiss your sister kiss, even though it was with tongue, which makes it a little more weird. And I don't know. I really think that this could have been a lot better had the dialogue been different, right? Had these characters been developed more, had even the language that they used changed. Now, I'm wondering how much was changed from the directors who left. Now, the initial report for the reason why they left is they were making this movie funny. The original directors were trying to make this movie humorous, and I think that it would have done really well for the film. There were funny moments, but they weren't like ha ha funny. They were like, huh, that's clever. I know that that's not, Star Wars isn't necessarily like roll in the aisles hilarious, but it definitely has its moment of humor. Especially the new films have come out with more humor. But that could have been what was changed about it. The reviews of Episode 8 said it was too funny. It was so humorous that it didn't feel like a Star Wars movie, and maybe that was part of the reason why some of the lines were cut. Maybe things were changed. Maybe things were left out because of the reviews of Episode 8. Now, we don't know. We can only guess and speculate at this point. But the dialogue, and that's saying something because of like Anakin, Episode 1 and 2 and 3. I mean, the dialogue for those films is not great. This bugged me more than that. At least that was like campy and cheesy and bad. This was just not compelling. This didn't make me feel one way or the other, which is disappointing for a film and a movie that I really, really wanted to enjoy. Now, that being said, really my only advice for those of you who are huge fans and haven't seen the film yet, if you haven't seen the film yet and you're a huge fan, maybe you have a family like me and it's hard sometimes to get out. But I want to say that the best advice I can give is just get rid of your expectations, especially if they're very specific. Like, you have to see one thing happen in this film. Don't expect it to happen. Don't do that. If you can get rid of your expectations, just say, hey, I want to go in and be entertained. You will go in and be entertained. You might be entertained more than you thought. You might be entertained less than you thought, depending on who you are as a person, your taste, and so on. I personally would rank this film probably on the 6 out of 10, maybe 6.5 out of 10. It is definitely not my favorite movie of the Star Wars canon, even of the new films that has come out. It is definitely the worst of all the films that have come out. Episode 7, 8, Rogue One was phenomenal in my mind. Episode 7 and 8 had their moments for sure. This is the worst one so far. That's not saying that it's a bad movie. It's a fine movie. If you've seen the movie, what do you think? Leave a comment in the section below. This has been Thaddeus from... Like, subscribe, and share. This has been Thaddeus from Going Nerdy. And as always, my friends, stay nerdy.